You told me that you love me, then you pointed sticks, stones, and bullets right at me. We had kids, but then you tried to ad lib, so now your time is restricted. Now you call me Miss Witches. Loved you, pleased you, but you couldn't see. You know I have to leave for me. And now, baby, when I called the police, you didn't believe me. Now I'm free from relationship rabies. Love me, please me. I was begging. Now you can't catch me stressing. All I ask is for God's blessings.
Okay, so I just read one of the more extreme or one of the crazier cases that you find when you're going through an order of protection case.
Discharge of a firearm. Marcus Rogers entered his plea today in Christian County. He was arrested last September after a 9-hour standoff in his Rosamond home. He was originally charged with attempted murder. That charge was dropped as part of a plea deal. He faces up to 13 years in prison.
And this is the 2025 recent case of Toberman versus Rogers. In this case, Rogers and Toberman were married. It looks like they had been married for about 10 to 15 years, and they had a child together. At some point, the parties agreed, or there was some sort of parental allocation custody arrangement where Rogers would have one video visit with their child for the month. The event that led to the order of protection happened on or around September 9th of 2017. And so during that time, or on that date, Rogers admittedly had an argument with Toberman. And in his attempt to chase Toberman off of his property and out of his yard, he fired 3 shots in her general direction. It looks like he shot near his foot, and then he took aim near his garden bed, which was near to Toberman, and then also fired in her general direction. He admitted to firing these shots to chase her off of his yard, which obviously that sounds insane, unless, of course, Toberman was in some way threatening his personal safety. But it doesn't appear to be the case. And later on, at his appeal, he expressed remorse. But anyway, he was eventually charged with attempted murder, and then I think it was reduced to an unlawful aggravated discharge of firearm, and he was sentenced to 10 years in jail, which is a felony. So the interesting thing about this case is that later on, probably about 5 to 6 years later, somehow Rogers was getting out on work release. And as soon as Toberman found out, I believe from the state's attorney's office of that county, she came into court and filed an order of protection. When she came in to file her order of protection against Rogers, she talked about the stress and fear and financial burdens of having to fight him in the divorce for multiple years, including up to the time of filing, if I'm not mistaken. She also stated that this was his way of trying to get contact with her, which was in court. So basically, the only way that he could get in contact with her was through his multiple pleadings in court, causing her to come into court and probably miss work. After her testimony for the order of protection at the trial level, Rogers' attorney moved for a directed verdict, meaning Toberman hadn't satisfied the statute or hadn't satisfied the legal requirements for obtaining an order of protection. He said that there hadn't been any threats to her since 2017. They said that, or he said that there was no stated intention for Rogers to try and see his child, and that this was more of Toberman's attempt to win in the domestic relations or family law division. The trial court that heard her petition for the order of protection denied their motion for directed verdict, and therefore they went on with their defense. Roger stated that he didn't intend to hit Toberman when he fired in her direction, but only to chase her off. He also said that if the protection order was granted, he would be immediately disqualified from his work release program, as well as his job as a legal clerk for the Illinois Department of Corrections, or IDOC. After hearing both sides of the story from Rogers and from Toberman, the court stated that the domestic abuse was, quote unquote, almost of the most severe nature. It stated that, or alluded to the fact that at minimum, it was gunplay in the vicinity of Toberman, which was as extreme of a domestic relationship as you can find outside of actually shooting her. The appeals court also said that the court acknowledged that it was not making a finding that the past abuse was frequent, but found that the severity and the consequences of what Rogers did were so severe and dangerous that Toberman was forever changed by the abuse and lived in permanent fear of Rogers. The appellate court also noted that the trial court stated that Rogers was a very smart man, and he could figure out how to find Toberman and to hurt her if he really wanted to do so. Considering the severity, nature, and consequences of Rogers' past abuse, the circuit court granted a 2-year plenary order of protection. A 2-year plenary order of protection is basically like a protection order for an extended period of time. That's the range that most courts will grant, usually maybe a few months, 6 months to maybe 2 years. But typically, when it's on the 2-year side, the abuse or the harassment or the offending conduct, which gives rise to a claim, they usually give 2 years for that kind of activity. The appellate court made reference to the fact that the Illinois Domestic Violence Act allows a petitioner to request an order of protection to protect them or protected persons from harassment, abuse, threats, neglect, interference with personal liberties, or exploitation. And on top of that, there's not necessarily, at least in case law as we know it, some limitation on the time period in which an order of protection may be brought. In this case, obviously, getting shot at 3 times, even once, is insane. And it would cause most people to have a form of PTSD or shell shock. I'm not a therapist or a counselor or a licensed mental health professional, although I believe that most people should get mental help and mental health treatment. This is a circumstance where even therapy may be an insufficient tool to help somebody go through that extreme type of trauma. Also, just as a side note, I think gun safety 101 is you never point a loaded gun or even any gun whatsoever at something you do not intend to obliterate, something that you do not intend to destroy. You should not point guns or handle guns in an unsafe fashion. And let alone being intoxicated. I believe the facts of this case was that he was also intoxicated when he fired at Toberman. The appellate court also stated that evidence of past abuse is relevant to a trial court's determination as to whether abuse occurred, regardless of whether prior abuse occurred 40 years ago or 5 years ago. And so, for those reasons, the extreme nature of what Rogers had done in terms of shooting 3 times at Toberman, regardless of whether his aim was off or whether he actually intended to not hit her, the appellate court, looking at the trial court, also noted the likelihood of danger of future abuse is a very important factor that the courts must consider when they are issuing orders of protection. The trial court took judicial notice, meaning they acknowledged that Rogers had a criminal case and a felony conviction, which stemmed from that extreme event in 2017. My opinion is that oftentimes And this is not a gendered conversation. This is for anybody who's a bully or an abuser and someone who's a victim, even though victims may not always be perfect in their own right. I think the first red flag that we see from this case is that he only had one visit per month as part of the divorce proceedings, as part of their custody or parental allocation arrangement. He only had one video call with his child. And I think it's reasonable to think he did something likely abusive to the family, which led to that restriction, which he inevitably accepted. And I think he showed himself to be an abuser. If what the court is saying is true, even though there appears to be a felony conviction and there appears to be multiple admissions on the record, I'm just going to say allegedly because sometimes we don't always have all of the facts from the record or the background. He only had that amount of time with his child, likely because of his behavior, and then he showed himself to be that person, to be that abuser, to be a victimizer. Shooting at somebody is, from my perspective, that looks like someone who's trying to kill that person. In Illinois, because you have to have a gun license, or there's some contention about that, but so far as we know, you must be licensed to bear firearms here. During a firearm safety course, they tell you that you should not engage in any reckless conduct when you're handling firearms. You don't look down the barrel of your own gun, so don't point it at someone else unless you intend to shoot them and kill them. I think the attempted murder charge probably could have stuck, but who knows, maybe he took a plea deal and he got his 10 years. Maybe it was the most efficient way of getting the case in and out the door. At the end of the day, it's not that serious in most cases to get to a point where you're so angry and drunk that you're shooting at people. I also think that it's important to keep track of all of the red flags in your partner. If someone is being abusive a little, they're probably going to become abusive a lot. You can look online, all of these commentators talking about how to manipulate your partner.
Alright ladies, I'm making this video today to tell you about some of the darkest manipulation tactics that men use to control you in a relationship. These men will make you feel confused, anxious, question your own thoughts and even your own reality. And why do they do this? Well, they simply see you as an accessory. They want to keep you hooked, codependent, and anxiously attached to them so they can use you as they please. Now, there's the expectation that a lot of you ladies have, maybe from society or culture, that you're the one responsible for keeping the relationship working.
How to breadcrumb somebody. All of these psychological tactics and psychological warfare techniques that they use on someone who they're supposed to love and at a minimum lay down with. In this case, it looks like they laid down together and they produced a child. So I think for people out there, it's really important to know that if you see a red flag, it's probably best to leave. And I'm not saying in all cases, maybe someone is ignorant of something, but in a lot of cases, we're seeing that people are not ignorant. They weaponize their ignorance so that they can continue the pattern of abuse. I'm not quite sure what happened with Rogers after after the order of protection was affirmed. I'm not sure if he went back into the IDOC system or if he's able to get out on work release. But I think anybody in Toberman's position would be afraid of somebody getting out of jail or out of prison, actually. Jail is more so for misdemeanors where you spend time incarcerated for less than a year. I think anybody in Toberman's position would be reasonably afraid that someone would be able to get out of prison, the same person who shot at you and who you allege caused you physical and other forms of abuse. This is more of a serious topic, but if you like these legal stories in your pocket, like and subscribe.
shoot at your foot, shoot at the garden. That's why I divorced you, don't get me started. Every time feels like the last time. If I'm a funny poem, just move to the next line. Stay away from me, baby, now I'm just fine. Loved you, pleased you, but you couldn't see. I know I have to leave for me. Now, baby, when I called the police, you didn't believe me. Now I'm free from relationship rabies. Love me, please me, I was begging. Now you can't catch me stressing. All I ask is for God's blessing. Should then bring me into court. Now that I see, I know you're just a little